Everyone knows that alcohol, drugs, and driving don't mix. Yet drivers who are under the influence are still a major cause of accidents. To help ensure that drivers of commercial vehicles stay drug and alcohol free behind the wheel, the Federal Transportation Employee Testing Act requires motor carriers to establish rigorous drug and alcohol testing programs. In this course, we will discuss this requirement and how it affects transportation employees, as well as the testing process itself, what happens if a driver tests positive for a substance, and how to get help for a drug or alcohol problem. In the United States, more than 37,000 people die in crashes every year. Nearly 250,000 more suffer serious injuries. To help reduce these numbers, it's especially important for professional drivers who transport people and materials on public roads every day to drive safely. So the government has established special regulations for transportation employers and employees who hold commercial driver's licenses known as CDLs. Standards created by the Department of Transportation, DOT, and its subagency, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, FMCSA, focus on drug and alcohol use by employees who have safety-sensitive jobs, including drivers who operate trucks or buses on public roads. These rules say that commercial drivers must not use or possess alcohol or any illicit drug while they are driving or are on call for assignment and may eventually be driving. They also cannot report for work or remain on duty when they are under the influence of alcohol or any illicit drug, or have used alcohol within 4 hours prior to reporting for work or receiving a notice to report. Drivers are also forbidden to report for duty or remain on duty while using a prescription medication that is prohibited by the FMCSA regulations or motor carrier policy, unless the physician has determined that the employee can perform their duties safely while taking it. Use of certain over-the-counter medications can be prohibited as well. These regulations apply to all CDL drivers who operate commercial motor vehicles that have a gross vehicle weight rating greater than 26,000 pounds, are transporting more than 16 passengers, including the driver, or are carrying hazardous materials. They can also apply to mechanics, dispatchers, warehouse workers, or other employees who act as occasional or fill-in drivers. To help enforce these regulations, motor carriers are required to set up drug and alcohol testing programs for their employees. If an employee fails a test for any reason, they must be removed from their driving activities immediately. The DOT also prescribes a minimum set of requirements that violators must complete in order to return to duty. But it's important to understand that all return-to-work decisions will ultimately be made by a driver's employer based upon their own policies. So, for instance, there is no guarantee that an employee's old job will still be waiting for them even if they fulfill the DOT's return-to-duty requirements. And since the FMCSA maintains a database of violators that is available to all employers, other motor carriers will know if a driver has a history of drug or alcohol violations. So for the sake of their current jobs as well as future livelihood, drivers of commercial motor vehicles should keep their name out of that database. Federal law requires that all motor carriers who are regulated by the Department of Transportation, DOT, implement drug and alcohol testing programs for employees who perform safety-sensitive duties. This includes all professional drivers who operate trucks or buses on public roads, mechanics, warehouse workers, and others. The drug and alcohol tests themselves fall into two broad categories: urinalysis to detect traces of drugs, and breath or saliva testing for alcohol. Any use of illegal drugs is a violation of the DOT and Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration (FMCSA) regulations. Having some types of legal drugs in your system without a valid medical reason can be a violation of the regulations as well. When tests indicate the presence of illegal substances, a driver will be relieved of their driving responsibilities immediately. While drinking alcohol is not illegal, the regulations do limit how much alcohol a driver can have in their system while they're on duty. This blood alcohol concentration, or BAC, is determined by means of saliva and breath tests. A BAC of 0.04 or higher will result in a driver being pulled from their job. Depending on local regulations, a driver whose BAC reads from 0.02 to 0.039 can be removed from duty temporarily until their next scheduled shift. The FMCSA regulations describe 6 specific situations in which commercial drivers are required to submit to drug or alcohol testing. First, newly hired drivers must test negative for drugs before their employer allows them to operate a commercial vehicle on public roads. Pre-employment testing is not required for alcohol. Secondly, drivers must be tested after they are involved in a fatal accident or receive a traffic citation resulting from an incident that results in an injury or disables a vehicle. Third, drivers are subject to unannounced testing at random. Fourth, if a driver shows signs of being under the influence of drugs or alcohol while on duty, a manager can send them for testing based on this reasonable suspicion. Fifth, an employee who has tested positive and been relieved of their driving responsibilities must pass a return-to-duty test before they can come back to work. And sixth, an employee who has had a drug or alcohol violation and passed a return-to-duty test must take a minimum of 6 unannounced follow-up tests during the first 12 months following their return. It's important to note that under DOT rules, urine samples taken for return-to-duty and follow-up drug testing must be provided under the direct observation of testing personnel. For a commercial driver, there's nothing very complicated about taking a drug or alcohol test. But since the results of these tests can have a significant personal and professional impact, drivers need to understand what's expected of them during the testing process. To begin with, they need to take the program seriously and be cooperative. Under the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration regulations, drivers who refuse to be tested face the same consequences as if they had tested positive for drugs or alcohol. When a driver is notified to report for drug testing, they must go to the collection site immediately. Showing up late for a test or not showing up at all can be considered a refusal to take the test. Leaving the testing location before the test is completed can also be considered a refusal. If a driver is being tested for drugs, once they're at the testing site, they are allowed 3 hours to produce a urine specimen. A 5-panel urinalysis is then used to test the sample for traces of 5 types of drugs: marijuana, cocaine, opiates such as heroin as well as opioids, amphetamines and methamphetamines, and phencyclidine, better known as PCP. A driver who is unable to provide a urine specimen within the allotted 3 hours will be evaluated by a licensed physician, known as the Medical Review Officer, MRO. If no medical condition is found to explain the driver's inability to provide a specimen, it will be deemed a refusal to take the test. If a urine sample indicates that it may have been tampered with or is otherwise fraudulent, the driver may be required to provide another one under the direct observation of testing personnel. Once analysis of the sample is complete, the laboratory will report the results to an MRO, who reviews the findings, evaluates any medical issues that may be involved, and passes the results on to the driver's employer. In general, the procedures involved in alcohol testing are similar to those for drug testing. The driver who is being tested is expected to report promptly to the test site and complete the testing process within the allotted time. Their breath or saliva is sampled and analyzed to determine the employee's blood alcohol content, BAC. A screening test technician or breath alcohol technician will perform an initial assessment using a breathalyzer or saliva swab. If the driver's BAC reads lower than 0.02, the testing is complete and no further action is required. But if the results are 0.02 or higher, the technician will next perform a confirmation test using an evidential breath testing device, EBT. If the EBT confirms a BAC of 0.02 or higher, the results will be reported to the driver's employer. The drug and alcohol testing programs that motor carriers implement for their employees help to accomplish several important goals. By giving commercial drivers a strong incentive to stay clean and sober behind the wheel, the tests help keep the roads safer for everyone who uses them. And by identifying drivers who have substance abuse problems, testing helps get them off the road before someone gets hurt. The testing program also allows those drivers to do what's necessary to get their life and career back on track. The Department of Transportation calls this process return to duty, and it begins as soon as a driver is informed that their test shows a drug or alcohol violation. At that time, they are provided with a list of substance abuse professionals, SAPs, that have been compiled by the agency. They can then select an SAP from the list and meet with them. The SAP will evaluate the driver's substance abuse problem and create a treatment plan to address it. The plan will usually include education and counseling to help the driver understand their problem and get it under control. When the treatment plan has been completed and the SAP believes the driver is ready, they will be given the appropriate return-to-duty drug or alcohol test. Department of Transportation regulations require urine samples for return to duty and follow-up drug tests to be provided under direct observation of testing personnel. A driver who tests as clean and sober is again allowed to drive a commercial motor vehicle on public roads. But the driver will continue to receive treatment and guidance for their substance abuse problem as recommended by the SAP. They will also be subject to no fewer than 6 unannounced drug and alcohol tests in the first 12 months after they return to service. And in some cases, an SAP can recommend that unannounced testing continue for up to 60 months. When a transportation employee has a substance abuse problem, it can have serious consequences for them, their employer, and everyone else on the roads. But they don't have to wait for a crash or a positive result on a drug or alcohol test before they start dealing with their situation. They can use resources within their company, union, and community to help themselves before a catastrophe occurs. Many employers and unions offer voluntary referral programs or employee assistance programs, EAPs, for employees who need help with substance abuse. And self-reporting can not only help a driver get on track for assistance and treatment, it can also help to secure their job by demonstrating to their employer that they are responsible and professional enough to take the initiative in getting help. Whether they focus on substance abuse specifically or address employee wellness in general, these programs can provide valuable resources for dealing with a drug or alcohol problem. Even an employee who has a friend with a drinking or drug problem can help them get the support they need through their employer's peer reporting program. And most communities offer a range of support services for people with substance abuse problems as well. Information about local resources can easily be found online. As we've seen, by encouraging commercial drivers to stay clean and sober behind the wheel, drug and alcohol testing programs can help to make the roadways safer for everyone who uses them. Let's review. Transportation employers are required to implement drug and alcohol testing programs for their employees who hold commercial driver's licenses. These tests can be administered to drivers as a result of specific situations, such as a fatal accident, as well as at random. If a test shows that a driver has violated federal drug and alcohol regulations, they will be immediately relieved of their duties. While there is a process by which violators can return to work, the best strategy for a commercial driver is to stay clean and sober behind the wheel. Now that you understand the drug and alcohol testing requirements for commercial drivers and know what you need to do to avoid problem situations, you can help make the roadways safe for all drivers every day.